Thanks for joining us here on 9 News Plus. I'm Chris Bianchi. Now, you've probably heard the term Hunter Biden's laptop a lot over the years, and not just in right-wing media. There are two active investigations, one from congressional Republicans and another from the Justice Department, Joe Biden's Justice Department, that are both looking into Hunter Biden, the president's son, and maybe some of the crimes he's allegedly committed, and we will get into that right here with 9 News legal expert Whitney Traylor. Whitney, if we can start things off with a bit of a broad perspective, what we know and those two investigations. Again, I mentioned that the Justice Department, for those of you who might not know, that's at the federal level, and then congressional Republicans. Remember, Republicans control the House of Representatives, so they are also conducting their own investigation as well.
Right, so the investigations somewhat overlap because they're both dealing with alleged behavior by Hunter Biden. Now, the DOJ is looking at both his tax returns and
His conduct, right?
Right, and these are misdemeanors, failing to file the tax returns, but then there's also a potential felony for tax evasion related to his 2016 and 2017 taxes. They're also alleging some false statements that he made when he made a gun purchase in 2018, when he said he wasn't using drugs, and at the time he was an admitted, had some addiction issues. So those are really some of the issues that the DOJ, and really when they started this in 2018, there was a U.S. attorney in Delaware who was a Trump appointee. So he has convened a grand jury that really has been meeting since, I think, 2018, and they haven't brought charges. Where the rub comes in with the House Republicans is that they want to get into other things. They want to go into the Biden family. They believe there was a pay-for-play scheme related to foreign adversaries. And so the House Republicans want to get into more of it. But because the DOJ is a criminal proceeding, that would essentially take precedence over the House Republicans. And so they're saying, look, charges should have been filed already, and DOJ, if you're not going to do anything, kind of get out of the way and let us do something. But at the same time, when you look at the extent of the investigation already, for example, President Biden has already turned over 25 years of tax returns. So a lot of people are saying, look, the House Republicans, you're turning over every stone, but you're not coming up with anything.
And to be clear, I think congressional Republicans have access to text messages, emails from Joe Biden. And I think when this first started, maybe from the Democrat side of things, there were concerns about what that could turn up if you're turning over 25 years of tax returns, years and years of, again, phone records, emails, voicemails. I understand the congressional Republicans reviewed some of the voicemails that were left by Joe Biden to Hunter Biden.
Right.
And you just said it a second ago. Is your understanding of that not a whole lot has come up at this point?
Well, that's exactly right, because there would have been either charges or subpoenas filed or something if the system is working. Now, of course, there's going to be people who say, well, it's political and the system is not working. But the reality is there has been an extensive amount of investigation, and as it relates to tying in money that the Biden family or Joe Biden himself may have received, there's just not evidence of that. Now, they're also looking at the time that Hunter Biden was on a board of directors for a Ukrainian company.
Burisma.
Right, and they're alleging that Joe Biden may have had some influence, but again, those claims, as it's being investigated, are fairly weak. Now, why all of this is sort of amplified recently is because you have this IRS whistleblower, Gary Shapley, who has said, he came forward and he said, hey, there were some irregularities into the investigation, the DOJ, and essentially what his claim is that, look, in 2022, he raised a number of these issues that there should have been charges perhaps in October before the midterm elections, and his claim is essentially that they slow walked, and here's a quote, he said, multiple steps in the investigation were slow walked or just completely not done. The investigation has now carried over. And this all started with the Trump administration. This was a Trump appointee who started this investigation, and the DOJ has kept that same appointee to avoid the look of impropriety. And so this has started back in Trump's administration, and we still don't have any charges. And so the House Republicans are saying, look, their charges should have been brought really back in October of 2022. Now this whistleblower, Gary Shapley, is saying, I, as an IRS special agent on this case, brought these concerns and I was taken off the case. So he now has essentially a whistleblower claim saying he was retaliated against by the DOJ. He was an IRS agent investigating the issue. He raised these issues in October of 22, and then he was removed, him and his team were removed from the Hunter Biden investigation, or the Biden investigation from the IRS perspective. So that whistleblower claim is going on as well. So I know I've just conflated a number.
I'll sum this up for you in just a second for those of you. So basically we've got two investigations going into Hunter Biden, again, the president's son, who admittedly, by his own admission, has been troubled. He's had a drug addiction, again, by his own admission over the years. One from the Justice Department, and that's a criminal one. Then you got the congressional Republicans, and then you've got this whistleblower complaint that says that they allegedly slow-walked or just intentionally slowed down everything for political reasons. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. And so now Jim Jordan, it's really him.
Top congressional Republican.
Over the head of the Oversight Committee, and James Comer, a Republican out of Kentucky. They're the two really in wanting to get into the whistleblower claim. Now, I've read a number of articles and reports on this whistleblower, and all that is least is being reported is that they slow-walked it and there were irregularities into the investigation of the IRS investigation into the Biden situation. So it's not, there's no detail, but this Gary Shapley, the alleged whistleblower, is also testifying in front of a number of congressional committees. So that could lead to something more, because at that point he may reveal more information than he has. Right now, it's literally the extent of his specificity is there were irregularities. And what they were saying is that in October of 2022, there was enough to charge him, but that the DOJ wanted to slow walk it because they didn't want to impact the November 2022. So I've...
The midterms,
Exactly, the midterm elections. So we're looking at this, and really you have to kind of separate the legal from the political. And it's hard to do because it is, as many things in Washington, it's very much imbued when there's a actual legal investigation going on by the DOJ, for example, and then you have these political factors that come in, and that's what's happening here.
I guess when it comes to it, legally, what is the general precedent? Is there, from the Department of Justice, from the DOJ, from the Justice in general, is there an attempt to try and avoid mixing politics and legality? So to maybe this whistleblower's claim, October 2022, that would be obviously pretty ominous timing for something to come out right before the midterm elections. Is there a legal precedent? Is that a generally something that's legally done to try and avoid influencing elections?
Well, you've seen it many times when you have a special counsel appointed or an independent counsel appointed.
2016.
Exactly. A number of different times this has happened to avoid that look of impropriety or to avoid any political influence. And so here in this case, I think that's what they tried to do by maintaining the same Trump appointee who's in the DOJ who's investigating it, and that is the Delaware U.S. Attorney David Weiss, and he was a Trump appointee. So, and he's convened the grand jury. So it's still, so it wasn't once Joe Biden came in and Merrick Garland said, look, to avoid that, I'm going to maintain the same U.S. attorney who's going to prosecute. So I think that takes out some of the political issues. And what happened was the DOJ started with this broad investigation really into Hunter Biden, and they've narrowed it down to these really these two issues, the tax issues related to 2016 and 2017, and he's alleged to have made paid back at least $2 million in back taxes. That's been reported a couple times. And then, of course, the second issue is when he went to purchase the gun and his statements about him not being on drugs. So what's interesting is because there's a lot of comparisons between President Biden and his son and how he's being investigated with former President Trump and how his family, Ivanka and some of his family members were investigated. But the difference is Hunter Biden never had an official position. He never...
He's the president's son.
He was simply the president's son. Now, the potential, and this is where a lot of conservatives are really up in arms when you hear about the laptop, and that was because he turned in his laptop to a company to be repaired, and it was on that laptop that the person who repaired it discovered these emails that may have suggested that President Biden used his influence in some of these foreign nationals, including Ukraine, China, and others, for his son, to
get positions on boards. Yeah.
And there's currently a lawsuit. Hunter Biden and his legal team has filed a lawsuit against that the computer repair company, saying, hey, that this was a violation of privacy, and they disclosed it. And a lot of people are saying, well, these random emails are not evidence that something has been done wrong. It's just the suggestion. So it was sort of like that opened the door. And that was what a lot of conservatives said. We need to go after that. We need to discover more about what's behind those statements on the laptop.
Is it a crime for Hunter Biden to get a position because of his last name? I mean, to me, as a private citizen, that would be a little not thrilling to hear, right?
No, that's a great question. And no, it's not a crime in and of itself to simply get a position because of your last name or because...
hey, I'm the president's son.
Right. Now, where it could become a problem is if the president is doing favors, or at the time the vice president, if he's doing a pay for play, if he's giving Ukraine or China or others some sort of benefit, then you have other issues that the vice president may have violated it. But again, this is, when you look at these financial crimes, they're very hard to get away with because the numbers don't lie. Now, of course, everybody can set up 100 different LLCs and S corps and all these other things, and it's hard to track the money. But this is, I would go back to the Trump organization that was actually convicted on a number of tax charges just last year. And that was because they had the records, they had the tax returns, they had the bank filings. Here, President Biden has been forthcoming, like I said, with 25 years of tax returns, and they haven't found anything. And so, again, the DOJ started very broad into this investigation, really for the last 5 years, convened a grand jury, and all they've come up with that's being reported is these two claims related to the gun purchase and the 2016 and 2017 taxes of Hunter Biden.
Would those charges be fairly minor? Or
well,
what would come from those?
There's potentially a tax evasion charge that would be a felony, and that's very serious, and that's related to undeclared income. And so, but again, here you go. If the undeclared income was, say, from his work on a Ukrainian company or what have you, now that's going to be a crime for not declaring the income. But receiving money from a Ukrainian company in and of itself is not a crime. The question is, were there favors promised or delivered by Vice President Joe Biden and now President Joe Biden? And that's where you really have to look at, there's a number of Republican committees, the House Oversight Committee and others, that are looking into this. And there's been no charges. There's been, this is the greatest, the most egregious crimes that are at least being reported are really these two. So that may speak to, there's the political, oh, he did this, he's giving favoritism to his family, but then you have to prove it in a court of law. And so that's where I separate the political and legal. And legally, so far, there's not a lot to go on.
So when you compare, and again, I know this is going to border the line here of politics a little bit here, but When you consider the Trump Organization and Donald Trump's indictment a few months ago in Manhattan, and some of those pending indictments that may be coming the next few months, and what we see here with Hunter Biden, is this a potential case of legal false equivalence? Is that the best way to put it, based on what you're saying here?
Yeah, I think it is, because what you have to look at is the efforts that were made to do the investigation. So, there's a lot of claims by conservatives that mainstream media is not reporting on some of this stuff. I agree. Mainstream media, you don't hear a lot about Hunter Biden's laptop and things like this. You hear this in sort of this amorphous, claims out somewhere out in the universe. Whereas with President Trump, you do have these, the Fulton County, you have the Mar-a-Lago classified documents, you have the recent indictment in New York, you have the conviction of the Trump Organization. The difference,
Civil suit as well.
Correct, multiple civil suits. The most recent assault claim, the civil claim that he lost, right? So these are all, this is not a matter of, okay, we're going to go after this person civilly, we're going to go after this person criminally, and we're not going to do that here. This investigation has been going on for 5 years into Hunter Biden by a Republican U.S. Attorney General. The fact that the question should be posed to that person, David Weiss, why haven't you filed anything? And the reality is, these, whether they're the political appointees, and he is a Trump appointee, they still have to have evidence. They still have a burden of proof. They're still licensed as an officer of the court, so they're not going to just put something forward that there's no evidence of. So I think there is a false equivalency there, because these other claims, particularly against President Trump, there was evidence and there were convictions and there's indictments, and that may come, for Hunter Biden. But as far as the legal connection between Hunter Biden and what Joe Biden may or may not have done, there's just, at least right now, there's not a lot of evidence. Now, the grand jury, that's a private proceeding. There may be more things coming, but that's what the House Republicans want. They want a deeper dive into these connections. But as far as I've seen, those investigations have taken place and are taking place.
So I guess to just maybe sum this all up, is it, and correct me or adjust how I'm going to create this analogy here, maybe a little bit of smoke around Hunter Biden, none around Joe Biden, while if you're comparing it with the Trump family, this would be, a 5-alarm fire essentially with the Trump family. Is that a way to put it?
That's a correct analogy. I would say, yeah, they're
legally.
Right, where the phrase where there's smoke, there's generally fire. That is applicable. I mean, and that is how prosecutors go about. Sometimes they have direct evidence, sometimes it's circumstantial evidence, and they have to put a case together. But that's exactly right. Hunter Biden, yeah, there's smoke around Hunter Biden. Does it tie it to Joe Biden? Not based on what's been produced so far. With the Trump Organization, yes, there is extensive evidence, which is why there were actual prosecutions and why these indictments are going forward. But I'm not saying that, just because it hasn't been reported as much on the Hunter Biden, I think part of it is because the evidence is so weak. Now some people are saying, well, there were emails on Hunter Biden's laptop that suggested that his dad was doing favors and things like that. They've started those investigations. They've went down that road, and now Jim Jordan and some of the other Comer are saying, look, DOJ, because if the DOJ starts their investigation, the congressional investigation will sort of take a back seat to it because of the criminal proceeding. And that's not a political thing, that's just very normal. And the House Republicans are saying, kind of get out of our way and let us do it. But at the same time, this has been an ongoing investigation. But as it relates to the IRS whistleblower, Jim Jordan has asked for documents and certain information from the Department of Justice, asking for it to be produced by June 8th. Now, Congress, they have the power to subpoena and some of these other things, but I'm not sure that they're going to be able to force the DOJ to turn anything over by June 8th. But that will be interesting to see if they do, and then maybe there'll be more revelations at that time.
And as we record this on May the 31st, that's only a little over a week out, so we'll find out more
Yep.
coming up then. But we'll leave it there. But 9 News legal expert Whitney Traylor, thanks for lending us some of your insight and expertise on this and clarifying some of these questions because we've heard a lot about it. But thank you, Whitney.
Sure thing. Good to be here.